They came and looked to the hills to get the people to go fight the wars. Poor people's always fought the wars, always have. The least they can do is give them a chance. Let's bring our veterans home. Not only physically, bring them home emotionally.
The Appalachian people are proud and patriotic, sending a higher percentage of their young men to war than any other region in the nation. We'll visit the hills they call home this week on For Veterans Only.
For Veterans Only is made possible by funding from the Disabled American Veterans, a congressionally chartered nonprofit organization of wartime disabled veterans. The producers thank this station and other public television stations for their assistance and cooperation in making this program available. For Veterans Only is also telecast by the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of the men and women serving on active duty in our armed forces at home and abroad.
For Veterans Only is a national television news magazine for America's veterans and a presentation of Veterans Productions USA.
Jim Clay is on special assignment this week. I'm Brian Patrick. Many Americans often snub their noses at the simple mountain folks of the Appalachian region, calling them hillbillies. But as we discovered during a pair of recent visits, these people are proud of their heritage, their close family ties, and their service to their country. But many Appalachian veterans think that they're not getting their due, and they're joining together to fight for it.
I'm leaving on a jet plane, don't know when I'll be back again.
Each time Americans went to war, these people left their mountain homes to serve their country. Many volunteered, sometimes entire families. Chuck Centers was one of half a dozen men in his family.
5 of us served in the military. So I am, to begin with, a hillbilly, proud of it, a Vietnam veteran, and damn proud of that.
While their country heritage is a point of pride for these veterans, it is perhaps the reason so many died on the front lines, especially in the jungles of Vietnam. A recent study at the VA Medical Center in Johnson City, Tennessee concluded if you were from Appalachia, you were 50% more likely to be killed in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, they were assigned as point men, predominantly in infantry or aggressive units, ambush units. The stereotype being that if you're from the hills, you know weapons, you know the woods, you know the lore, you know how to get through the jungles. The idea was if they were so good at woods lore, they were so good at hunting and weapons, we'll put them in point. And of course, Point was the man that was shot. And when he was shot, everybody else died for cover.
Even Army nurses were victims of ridicule.
On my record, it showed I was born in Kentucky and I entered in West Virginia. And you talked about prejudice. When they asked you where you were born in Kentucky and you said Paintsville, where's that? I mean, I might as well have been born in Siberia.
Veterans here in eastern Kentucky have found a real plus in this negative attitude toward them, incorporating under the name Plus for pride, loyalty, unity, and service. Now about a year old and covering 5 counties, Plus has succeeded in unifying veterans from the different service organizations.
Well, the prejudice against us maybe because we're hillbillies and maybe because we feel united as Eastern Kentuckians, has made us put aside those little differences we have and brought us together and made us one force.
With an all-volunteer veteran staff, Plus operates this Veterans Referral Center in Paintsville, Kentucky. Here, veterans reach out to one another, and for people like former POW Chuck Little, it's meant a renewal of trust that he had completely lost.
I never did trust nobody, no veteran, nobody. When I decided to get drunk, I got drunk, and then I went out and got in trouble. I go in the head of a holler, and if I got drunk enough and decided to go out, I usually went out. First person I run into, I usually ended up fighting or getting put in jail real quick.
A couple of years ago, Chuck found peace in religion.
After then, I met these guys, and without telling me dirty jokes, I listened to humor, and I learned to know them and get along with them. And I didn't have to reveal things from Vietnam or ever talk about Vietnam. I just talk about ourselves around here. I really rather hear humor than damn things, because I deal with that up here all the time.
A lot of feelings are shared here with the only people who can really understand them.
My wife and children do not understand why sometimes I have to hit the hills. I have to be alone. The reason I have to be alone is because something is still eating inside. And I mean, it's not just me. I know all these gentlemen experience it. It's just something you can't explain. But you have to get away and deal with it.
It's just people working together to try to help one another. And Vietnam vets have a trust for one another, not like you go out here and you got someone, a total stranger, and you just don't trust them, because the typical Vietnam vet does not trust people.
While the Veterans Referral Center does provide a place to turn and people who will listen, that's not enough for some of these troubled veterans.
It doesn't pay your bills. It doesn't buy the groceries. You know, that don't buy your medicines that you've got to have to live. This is great, and we love it. And if I didn't have it, sometimes I don't know what I really would do. But that still don't put the food on your table when you're not able to work.
Even those who are able to work have difficulty finding a good job. Appalachian industry has been hard hit by the changing economy.
Coal, oil and gas, glass industry, steel industries. We found in a recent study that about out of 8,000 Vietnam-era veterans we had in this area who were out of work and looking for assistance in job service offices, about 7,000 of those were probably categorized in the dislocated worker category.
As far as good, decent paying jobs, yes, there's a shortage of jobs, not only for veterans, but for everyone around.
Kentucky's statewide unemployment rate is around 7%.
In East Kentucky, veterans' unemployment rate is between 11 and has gone up to 14%. So unemployment in Eastern Kentucky is tough for everybody, but for veterans it's particular hell because for some reason we have higher unemployment than the general population.
As the local veterans employment rep for Kentucky Job Service, Claude Ratliff has found it tough sometimes selling employers on hiring veterans.
But anyway, I went into a particular employer in one of the counties around here, and I had a button on my jacket, and it said, "Hire veterans, one good job deserves another." The employer saw the button, he read it out loud to me, and then he laughed. He said, "What good job did they do?" You know, I bit my tongue, I really did.
That was 3 years ago. Attitudes have mellowed somewhat to a point where veterans' job fairs, like this one in Huntington, West Virginia, attract dozens of employers and hundreds of veterans from 3 states. At least for the moment, it helps to be a veteran as you look for work.
Today it does help. On other jobs, when I filled out an application or talked to people about a job, they really didn't ask if you was been in service. You know, some of them act like really didn't care if you was a veteran or not, what it amounted to.
I don't see where it's helped me. I mean, I feel good on the inside of what I've done, how I served and, received an honorable discharge and, but other than that, it hasn't paid off as far as job dividends.
Marguerite Trogdon was a jet engine mechanic in the Navy, but no one seems to need her skills right now. She hopes her service experience will somehow help her find a good civilian job.
They look at me and they say, well, if you can do that, you may be able to do something for us.
But the simple fact remains, without retraining, a lot of these veterans won't find a good job close to home.
The problem being, of course, if you're a veteran, you have a family, you've got to support that family. To acquire new marketable skills, you really need to be in an institutional training facility. But when you do that under the federally funded Job Training Partnership Act, you do not have an income. So veterans are saying to us, I can't afford to train because I've got to have work.
Leaving home to find work isn't a popular option here.
I'm in love with West Virginia. I mean, I've lived here and I've been to other places like Cuba and Haiti and other states, but I just like West Virginia, and I shouldn't have to leave it to find a job, I feel.
People have very strong ties to the family in this area, and they don't want to leave. But if the job opportunities in other areas, in order for them to be back in the workplace, they've got to move frequently. We've got an awful lot of West Virginians who are working in surrounding states who, given the opportunity, would come back to this state to work. So until we find a way to create more jobs within the area, we're still going to have a problem.
One alternative is for veterans to go into business for themselves.
The job opportunities for veterans in this area just basically was almost non-existent. Yet we had a lot of veterans out there who had over 20 plus years, for example, developed good strong skills, had a lot of good experience and maybe a little bit of tools, but just didn't know how to put it together. but what I'm finding is that they just don't believe it can work. All right, they just don't think, there's no jobs here, why bother? Why try? Why not move on, kind of thing.
This Tri-State Veterans Job Fair is a step in the right direction, bridging the geographical barriers that divide the Appalachian veterans.
Just by being here, we've broken down several barriers as far as the geographic area goes, and that is that Ohio River. We've come up against a lot of networking that's been developed right here, being able to deal with other states on a one-on-one level.
But the farther out into the hills you get, the more difficult it is for veterans to network.
Here we have small spots of population. Here's a little community with 500, here's one with 200, here's one with 700, and there's a mountain road between them and coal trucks to fight.
Some don't even have a dependable car, forcing them into isolation. Others hide from society, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD.
They want to stay away from anything that can cause hurt. Easiest way is you don't have relationships, you don't have families, you don't have children. My Lord, the Vietnam veteran average is somewhere in the 80 to 90% divorce rate. This is only caused by pain. Pain of the veteran causes pain to the family. Pain to the family causes a breakup. A breakup ends up with a homeless vet if we're not very careful.
In many parts of Appalachia, VA medical centers are hours away on rough roads, and these folks feel they are underserved.
When a veteran goes down to Huntington and he don't have a service-connected disability, when he goes in there, it'll take him all day to go in there and get him a few pills for the flu or whatever. It takes you all day to, when you go in there at 8 o'clock in the morning, you'll get out there about 4 in the afternoon.
When they went in the service, it was all told that America will take care of you. We thought they would. The American people have been told today that we're taking care of our veterans. They are lying to the American people.
If there is a message that goes to the country from here, it is get together and stick together and depend on your own people to sow the seeds to do the job that you want done.
You have to go in with the attitude that you're going to win, but you got to go in with the attitude that you're going to stay and fight just like you did in the war. You can't run and hide from them.
We picked ourselves up, and we're proud of ourselves. And the shout is just now starting. So if you live in a small town and you're fighting amongst yourselves in your little groups, it's time to quit. It's time to get together as veterans. It's time to throw all that away and join for one purpose, and that's to make America aware of what we deserve as veterans and of what we're going to get.
Though many miles separate most Appalachian veterans from VA medical facilities and other services, they stay here because this is their country. Battle sounds have faded into the peaceful sounds of a mountain morning. Roosters crowing, birds chirping, rain pattering softly on a tin roof. Their families are here, their roots are here. This is the America for which they fought.
Where have all the young men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young men gone? Soldiers took them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
Your comments and suggestions about our program are always appreciated. Many of our programs are produced as a direct result of letters received from our veteran viewers around the country. Write for Veterans Only, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. For Veterans Only is also telecast on the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of our men and women on military duty at home and abroad.
Millions of Americans are honoring the men and women who gave their lives in service to their country during special Memorial Day ceremonies this week. Many of these fallen heroes were laid to rest at the Fort Snelling National Cemetery in Minneapolis. VA News editor Dennis West has this special report from the nation's heartland.
The tradition of designating a day to commemorate America's sons and daughters who have given their lives in service to their country first began in 1868. For over a century, Memorial Day ceremonies have been conducted every year at hundreds of national cemeteries, including this one, Fort Snelling National Cemetery, Minneapolis, St. Paul. But initially, America's attention has been captured by Arlington's National Cemetery in Virginia, rich in its historical significance and captioned by its eternal flame.
Forward! Hurry! Guards! Halt! Forward! Hurry! Ready? Hurry! Freeze, set! Hurry!
As America remembers, we remember the honored dead on this Memorial Day, 1989. Here at Fort Snelling National Cemetery, we reflect upon the rows, row after row, that seem to stretch into eternity, and we reflect upon the images of those who lie beneath these rows. They, like us, had hopes and dreams, families and friends, fears and frustrations. We remember their smile, the comfort of their presence, and we remember our grief at their passing. We wipe away our tears, we remember. We swell with pride as we stand upon the hallowed ground which embraces their eternal souls.
Fort Snelling National Cemetery got its start back when Fort St. Anthony was first established back in 1820. The first burial was Elizabeth Snelling, who was the daughter of Josiah Snelling, who was building the fort at the time. She was the first white child born in Minnesota. That established the post cemetery, and anyone that had died in the post and the body was not returned to their home was buried in that post cemetery. That post cemetery existed at the old fort until 1904, when it was moved about 4 miles down the road toward its present location now. That post cemetery was moved in about 1895 and lasted in that second position down there until 1939. At that time, with the expansion of the airport, it was decided to move that cemetery to its present location and declare it a national cemetery. We average about 20 interments a day here at Fort Snelling. We go higher in the wintertime when a lot of the outstate cemeteries are closed due to the bad weather. We bury year-round, so we go up closer to 30 a day during the winter. But our normal average is about 20 burials a day. That requires a lot of close coordination because the majority of those burials are in about a 4-hour period. We have to be able to provide the family with a serene setting. We are one of the few cemeteries that offer an all-volunteer rifle squad to offer military honors to these families. Well, up until 1963, people had stopped using national cemeteries. In fact, the Army had come to the decision by 1962 to just not develop any more acreage in the cemeteries and let them sort of die out because there wasn't a demand for burial. And that same order was signed by President John F. Kennedy. And the next year, when he was killed and buried in Arlington National Cemetery, there was a great new look at the national cemetery system, and people started to wanted to be buried in national cemeteries, not only Arlington, but all the other national cemeteries. The Army said, well, they wouldn't go back, they weren't going to develop anymore, and that's when the Congress made the decision to move these national cemeteries to the Veterans Administration at the time. And it was the death of the president that signed the order that was going to let these national cemeteries die out that caused their rebirth.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Knelt down by her bedside, and she prayed, Lord above, hear my plea, and protect all the sons who are fighting tonight. And dear God, keep America free.
In her own good land here, she's been abused. She's been burned, dishonored, denied, and refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare and she's wearing thin, but she's in good shape for the shape she's in. 'Cause she's been through the fire before. And I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning. We take her down every night. We don't let her touch the ground, and we fold her up right. On second thought, I do like to brag, 'cause I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag.
Perhaps the more prolific purpose for Memorial Day was expressed by Abraham Lincoln on November 19, 1863. His immortal words expressed the vision for which these lives were given and the challenge for those left behind. Far above our poor power to add or detract, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced.
Because veterans' benefits are constantly changing, the Department of Veterans Affairs has prepared a special booklet entitled A Guide to Veterans' Benefits. For a free copy of this informative and timely publication, write to VA Hotline, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. If you're experiencing a particular problem in qualifying for veterans' entitlements, the Department of Veterans Affairs will provide you with direct assistance. Address your correspondence to VA Hotline, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201.
This week on Veterans Mail Call, a viewer from Ashland, Kentucky writes, "Your program on diabetics really touched me because I am a diabetic. I hope they don't stop the research the VA hospitals are doing." And this letter from Danville, Virginia. There are more and more women getting out of the military service every day. They have problems different from their male counterparts. They deserve respect and equal time. From Brainerd, Minnesota, I have only one complaint about your program. It's only a half an hour long. Mrs. R. McKenna writes from Durham, North Carolina, it's a shame we only recognize our veterans on Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Veterans Day, and shelve them the rest of the year. They just didn't fight on holidays. They fought all year. A viewer from Amarillo, Texas, takes issue with our portrayal of VA medical centers. Your program makes it appear that VA hospitals are the best in the world, all caring and all curing. Regretfully, all VA hospitals are not that way. And finally, from Sterling, Virginia, this note. Until the Communist government of North Vietnam cooperates fully on the POW-MIA issue, no U.S. company should do business there. Next week on For Veterans Only, we'll look back 45 years to perhaps the greatest military victory of all time, the Allied invasion of Europe, which began on June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. Until then, I'm Brian Patrick for Jim Clay, reminding you, when you need someone to count on, you can always count on a veteran.
For Veterans Only is made possible by funding from the Disabled American Veterans, a congressionally chartered nonprofit organization of wartime disabled veterans. The producers thank this station and other public television stations for their assistance and cooperation in making this program available. For Veterans Only is also telecast by the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of the men and women serving on active duty in our armed forces at home and abroad.